Welcome back to the Michigan Business Beat, brought to you on the Michigan Business Network, and we are remote today on location at the Grand Hotel. And we're here for the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce's annual Policy Conference. And with us right now is U.S. Senator Gary Peters. Senator, it's always good to see you.
Chris, always a pleasure. Good to be with you once again here on the island, plus other places that I see around the state of Michigan.
Well, we do wind up in some of the same places, but I think we have the same concerns, and that's the welfare of Michigan. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things you've been doing. One of the issues I want to talk about is with all the talk about changing NAFTA and all the trade agreements that are going on, you don't want to stop that commerce between borders. But there's also a security situation, and you're in the middle of that.
Well, I am. I am the ranking member, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. So we oversee the Department of Homeland Security, so border issues, immigration issues, all of those go through the committee. And certainly we're dealing with some very significant issues on the southern border right now. But as I remind my colleagues just about every day, we have a northern border in the United States as well. That doesn't seem to be talked about much, but we have to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to keep us safe. The number one thing about border security is that we have to have secure borders, keep Americans safe. I think that's fundamental role of federal government is to keep us safe. But having said that, you also have to move trade and commerce efficiently. So that puts Department of Homeland Security in a tough position. Keep us safe, but also move stuff quickly and move it expeditiously, especially in Michigan with just-in-time delivery on our manufacturing plants. They got to get there right on time, and if they don't, the whole supply chain backs up. It causes economic problems. And so as we're dealing with the southern border issue, we're starting to see Border Patrol officers, or I should say CBP officers, the folks that are in those booths moving trade and commerce. Many of them are starting to get transferred down to the southern border now. And as you start having fewer people, you're going to see longer waits, you're going to see backup in traffic. And when you see these transfers happening, that's on top of the fact that right now, based on studies, Customs and Border Protection has 4,000 fewer officers than they should to be properly manned for the type of commerce that we do. And then when you start pulling them away from the northern border, we're going to have a compounded problem. So I've introduced legislation to authorize the hiring of at least 600 new CBP officers every year until we get to maximum staffing levels. I'm working with a Republican in a bipartisan way, Senator John Cornyn from Texas, because I think it's interesting, folks don't realize, of the three busiest border crossings in North America in terms of land volume going across, Michigan has two of them. Laredo, Texas is number one, then Detroit, Windsor is two, and Port Huron, Sarnia is three. So this is a big issue for us and for business there in Michigan.
Well, people don't realize, too, Halifax built that deep water port, and that brought in a lot more, and that's moving across as well.
It is. And getting the ports, you mentioned port staffing, too. The thing I'm working on is to make sure that we really maximize our port facilities. Right now, the Port of Monroe, for example, we want to be able to increase trade through there, but we're running into problems with the Department of Homeland Security that doesn't want to have a CBP officer there, where we're bringing in ship traffic through the St. Lawrence Seaway. I mean, the more we can utilize ports in Michigan, that's going to be good for all businesses in Michigan. And usually it's an investment of a CBP officer there, but the return on investment is huge. But working through the bureaucracy of Homeland Security is something that I've been doing a lot of, and I think we're getting better at, and we hope to be able to make some changes.
Well, I remember when we became a port and a free trade zone at the Lansing Airport, and how much we had to go through there. We actually had to finance that customs group for the first year.
That's right, yeah. And so you see the airports. And I mentioned when it comes to CBP officers, they're also there at our airports. So our folks at airports are really concerned, especially when you get into travel time and you have international flights coming in. You could have really long lines, and you have long lines, and people are delayed going through customs. They may miss their flights. I mean, it's there are all these other consequences as a result of being understaffed.
Well, listen, you work in a lot of different veins for a lot of different organizations and a lot of different people. Let's talk a little bit about the aging in place piece.
Yeah. Well, I'm working on legislation to facilitate communities where aging in place can be facilitated, and understanding that it's complicated to make sure that people have the opportunity to live independent, fulfilling lives by aging in place who don't want to go to any kind of institutional setting. But age in place is not an easy thing to do. I went through it with, actually going through it now with parents, elderly parents. But if you need transportation issues and health issues and in-home care issues, oftentimes there isn't a real one-stop shop where you can go to work through all of that. And as our population continues to age, we're going to have more and more folks. It's the right thing to do for people, but you also save a lot of money as well. And we can't just keep throwing money at a process that is not really people friendly as well. So we're hoping to change that, and we'll be developing some best practices, looking at some models around the country. There's some great models here in Michigan, but there are other models around the country that I think we can emulate and help people live fulfilling, independent lives and be able to stay in the home that they want to stay in.
Well, there's not a lot of breaks out there either for the caregiver, who spends a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of resource.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's part of it as well. And how do you have a loving caregiver as well who may be related to be able to help them through that burden as well. And it ends up saving taxpayers money, but bottom line, it's just the right thing to do for people.
You're absolutely right. And that's what you dwell on, doing the right thing for people. Gary, it's always good to have you here. Senator Gary Peters.
Great to be with you, Chris. Thank you.
All right, buddy. And again, you are watching and listening to the Michigan Business Beat on the Michigan Business Network at the Grand Hotel for the Policy Conference put on once a year by the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'm Chris Holman. Stick around. There's more ahead.